I will present the One Health approach in relation to the ocean and in the context of climate change. I'm the only one speaking, but Pierre is around. And this year marks the beginning of the decade of ocean science for sustainable development, and it calls for a good science to inform policies. It calls for an increase in the knowledge of all stakeholders in relation to the ocean. It insists on the need to address pressing environmental issues such as climate change, biodiversity loss, marine pollution, and the degradation of marine and coastal environment. And it intends to deliver a solution to address the decline in ocean health. So we want to use, and we are using the One Health approach in relation to the ocean, because the interest of the One Health approach is to consider altogether the health of the environment and the ecosystems, and here the health of the ocean, together with animal health and human health at the global, regional, and local level. And it states the need for interdisciplinarity in research and intersectorality when it comes to decision making. And here is the existing scientific research in relation to One Health. And if we take the research done on the Web of Science, and this is almost 5,000 publications from 2004 to 2021, we can see that many disciplines are involved into the research on One Health, but it is mainly on public, environmental, and occupational health, as you can see here, or environmental sciences, or in the area of medicine, biology, veterinary sciences, but only few publications are on social science and always linked with biomedical sciences. So here the question is, what about ocean health? The ocean health to be protected during the decade. And there is a gap between what is stated into the document of the ocean decade and what we can see on in the research on One Health. And here the question first is, when we speak about ocean health, there are many different definitions according to scientific disciplines, whether it is oceanography, anthropology, sociology, law, or geology. And here on the Web of Science, in relation to One Health, we can see that the ocean is underrepresented, and it's mainly concerning ocean physics, climate change, or biogeochemistry. The good news is probably to have a common vocabulary on policy and governance between the documents of the Ocean Decade and the publications on One Health. And here, what we can say is that on one hand, scientific research on One Health is barely connected to the Ocean Decade thematics. And on the other hand, the Ocean Decades document does not reflect the results of the ongoing scientific research on One Health. So to move forward, we can say that there are common interests that we have seen in the two documents, and we could start the dialogue like with that. Using the One Health approach. It's marine and coastal environment, marine pollution, marine conservation, ocean literacy, or ocean acidification. Here you can see the vocabulary used in the Ocean Decade, and the common dialogue could help solving the challenges that are stated for the Ocean Decade, like combat marine pollution or protect biodiversity loss. And this is the work we have done with our colleague from the University of the South Pacific. I know that Payal and Jeremy are around, and we we implemented the One Health approach in practice, and to solve or to discuss regional and local issues. And we considered altogether environmental changes. So this is a question of ocean health here, and environmental changes together with the notions of development, ocean activities, law and policy and governance. And we associated, and thanks to our colleagues in the Pacific, we associated many different stakeholders, and our work has been integrated directly into the National Ocean Policy of Fiji and into the Blue Pacific Ocean Report. And here the One Health in practice means to consider the socio-ecological systems all together. And I thank you for your attention.
South Africa, from a marine point of view, is incredibly fortunate. We have a very long coastline of over 3,500 kilometers. And within that coastline, we have a number of bioregions. So these are environments that specifically have very defined habitats. So Algoa Bay and the regions around it, which are in the Agulhas bioregion, is particularly rich in marine biodiversity, and especially so with the marine organisms on the ocean floor. The sponges and sea squirts and corals and soft corals, etc. And specifically the bacteria that live with them, so they're microbes. And it's really important that we acknowledge how important that biodiversity is, because the more biodiversity you have, the better your chances are of discovering something new. So to explain the sea to laboratory process, we go out into the field and then we use equipment known as remote operating vehicles, or ROVs. And the ROV has really good camera equipment and video equipment, and we can then use that to identify sponges or sea squirts or organisms that are down there that are potentially of interest for us for research purposes. And then we use a robotic arm on the ROV so that we can specifically collect the specimens we're interested in a non-destructive way, without damaging the reef habitats. And we also make sure that we're not taking the only specimen that is there. And then we also take samples for a DNA analysis, and the DNA that we isolate is used to potentially identify the genes that the bacterium uses to make that chemistry. We call it gene mining. We will then use genetic engineering to see whether we can persuade a bacterium that grows in the laboratory, such as Escherichia coli, our gut bacterium, and persuade this bacterium to produce the compounds we're interested in the lab. And the compounds we have are also screened in our collaborating labs for anti-cancer activity and for potential inhibitory activity against malaria and other parasites. So the compounds that we get from the sea, those don't necessarily end up in the pharmacy, but what they do is they give us ideas about what kind of compound can be used to target these diseases, so that we can go into the lab and develop these ideas into fully fledged pharmaceutical compounds that can be tested and put into clinical trials.
Hi, I'm Jazz, and I'm a PhD student researching natural product development at the University of Plymouth. My main focus is on deep sea sponges and their diverse microbial communities, with the view to discover novel bacterial species with bioactive molecules to solve medical challenges such as antimicrobial resistance. We work alongside the marine biologists. Essentially, they collect and preserve the specimen. We then process the specimen in a way that enables us to access the microbial communities within. We then select bacteria of interest based upon morphology, size, texture, and colour of the colonies that grow on the agar plates. Bacteria can take many forms. Over the past few years, we have seen a rise in bacterial infections that are becoming increasingly difficult to treat. This is due to the bacteria being able to mutate and survive against the antibiotic that would have originally killed them. This bacteria can then pass on the mutation to other bacteria, over time causing the antibiotic to become less effective. Therefore, our role is to find alternative antibiotics to treat these bacterial infections.
Of the One Ocean Hub talks. My name's Bhavani Narayan-Swamy, and I'll be looking at ocean plastics, exploring its connection to climate change and to human health. What do you think of when you hear someone talking about plastic? Do you think of plastic bags, single-use straws, or perhaps clothing? Maybe you think of computers, electronic equipment, such as mobile phones or smart speakers. Or perhaps cars, children's toys, medical equipment. And in these unprecedented times of the COVID pandemic, many more of us are using these single-use disposable masks. Perhaps, unfortunately, like me, you think of the more negative side of the rubbish littering our shores and our seas, such as fishing nets, plastic bottles, cups, and general single-use plastic bags. Or maybe you think about the animals that become entangled or ingest the plastic. Here we see the impact of larger plastic items on organisms, but smaller fibres, fragments and pellets, the micro and nano-sized particles, are just as important. When we talk about the impact of plastic on human health, we are talking here both about the impact on their physical and mental well-being. Litter, including plastic, is found throughout our marine environments, and it is particularly evident along the shoreline. Seeing this litter can have a negative effect on an individual's overall well-being. Having seen litter on beaches as far away as remote northern Svalbard, it becomes quite depressing realising how much of an impact we as human beings have actually had. Engaging with local communities can help with this issue. People want to remove it, as it is an eyesore and cause economic impacts. Who wants to spend time on a beach which is full of litter and plastic? Since the mid-1980s, there has been an International Coastal Cleanup Day, where people from around the globe work together to try and make a difference in their local communities, from picking up rubbish to encouraging local communities to invest in litter bins and then encourage people to actually use them. However, it is not just the mental health of people that plastic has an impact on. A big issue also surrounds the actual disposal of plastic. Many low and middle income countries have accepted the waste produced by higher income countries. However, the means to properly dispose of it is not always in place, and the sheer volume of it is overwhelming. This, for example, are some rubbish bales that you can see in Malaysia. In Ghana, a commercial district near the centre of Accra has become the home to electronic, automotive and e-waste from many high-income countries, as well as more locally, especially for the e-waste. When we think of this waste, how many of us stop to think about the plastic that is involved, all the wires that are coated in plastic, for example, for our computers. Metal itself is valuable, and the easiest way to extract the metal is to simply burn the plastic. And it's not just on large scales where plastic is being burnt, but also in smaller scales around the world where people burn their rubbish, which includes plastic, perhaps in their back gardens. Different plastics, when burnt, give off different vapours, from just simple hydrocarbons through to cyanides, as well as polychlorinated biphenyls. PCBs are a dioxin and can pose serious health risks to unborn babies and children. They may suffer developmental and neurological problems for prolonged or repeated exposure, even to small amounts of PCBs. Short-term exposure to high levels of dioxins may result in skin lesions and altered liver function. Long-term exposure has been linked to impairment of the immune system and reproductive function. So what is the link between plastic and climate change? Do you know where plastic originates from? Plastics are largely derived from fossil fuels and can be extracted from both the terrestrial and marine environment through drilling or fracking. It is transported by tankers, pipes or lorries to the distillation plant where crude oil is separated into liquid and gases. Naphtha is the crucial compound for plastic. In the distillation plant, plastic refining takes place, which is the breakdown of hydrocarbons, and is then turned into plastic resin. Up to 213 million metric tons of CO2 equivalent was produced in 2015 for the manufacturing of ethylene alone, and this is the building block for polyethylene plastics. So to put this into context, this is equivalent to about 45 million passenger vehicles emitting CO2. The next stage is when various blends of materials are blended together and eventually turned into pellets. More than 300 million tons of plastic is created every year and transported around the world, and then is melted down to make anything, including these plastic bottles. In the production of primary plastics, it is estimated that more than 1 billion metric tons of CO2 is produced, which in 2015 was equivalent to 3% of the global fossil fuel emissions. This schematic figure shows the interactions between climate and plastic. It indicates where plastic will affect climate change and through the contribution of greenhouse gases and interact with the impacts of climate change in the natural environment. The coloured shapes highlight how each component is connected to both plastic pollution and climate change. The red circles indicate where plastic directly contributes to climate change, such as through the extraction, incineration, recycling, landfill, whilst the green-blue square highlights where climate change is actually exacerbating the spread of plastic pollution. The yellow pentagon shows where plastic pollution and climate change together are likely to impact more on vulnerable environments and ecosystems, such as the Arctic, whilst the purple diamond suggests solutions that may help mitigate against both issues, such as blue carbon habitats, which not only sequester carbon but can also bury and trap plastics, preventing their further spread. However, we all still have our bit to do. We all need to do more to reduce the amount of plastic we actually use, reuse whatever we can, and correctly recycle our plastics. Many thanks.